Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Strange Playgrounds! Yay! Been a little while, obviously. As per usual, very, very busy. Lots of stuff going on, including the new channel over at Our Lives in Horror. If you enjoy the sort of podcasty stuff that we do on this channel, especially the discussions that we have with other horror writers and whatnot, go and check that out. It's going to be good fun. There's a big video up there at the moment, and a couple more coming very soon, my loves. For the purposes of this one, I read a lot. Obviously, I read a hell of a lot. I've always got more than one book on the go because that's the way I like to read. What I tend to do is have like something very big and heavy, or a couple of very big and heavy books, and then something slightly lighter, and the lighter tends to be something pulp. It tends to be a collection of pulp horror stories, or sci-fi stories, or the Warhammer 40,000 stuff, which I really enjoy. That's it. They're sort of like the come downs. It's the snacks in between the main meals, which I really enjoy. I'm currently reading. Actually, my current snack is I'm rereading The Infinite and the Divine, which is a wonderful Warhammer 40,000 book. In fact, even if you're not into Warhammer 40,000, you would probably enjoy that book. I will do a separate video on The Infinite and the Divine because it's worth talking about that book. It's so unusual, given the subject matter. It's so unusual. But the big, heavy book I've been rereading recently is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. It's an odd one for me. I tend to go for spans of years without reading it, and then pick it up again. And the reason I pick it up again is because I forget how it affects me. And that's not a condemnation of the book at all. No, far from it. This book, for me, is really profound. It has a profound emotional effect, as it does on most people who read it. For those of you who are familiar with the adaptations, there are currently, insofar as I'm aware, there are 3 adaptations of The Haunting of Hill House. There's the 1963 film, which is wonderful, by the way. That's the closest to the book. It does change the ending, interestingly. Not significantly, but just marginally. The details of it's only changed in terms of the details to give you more of a climax. But it's very, very close to the book in terms of ethos, character. In fact, I mean, it's almost scene for scene. There is the hot garbage 1999 adaptation. Don't even bother. It's not even so bad that it's amusing. It's just shite. It fundamentally misunderstands what this story is about. It's like a lot of horror, like mainstream horror cinema from that era. It is saturated in bad CG. It's comic book, it's ridiculous, but not in a good way. It takes itself simultaneously way too seriously, but doesn't seem to understand what it's doing. It's a bad piece of work. And then, of course, there's the wonderful Netflix adaptation, which we've spoken about before. The Netflix adaptation, the series, is really interesting, the Mike Flanagan one, because it is far removed from the original book. Far removed from it. What the Mike Flanagan series does is it takes the setting, the names, and the base concepts, the themes of the book, and it expands them out into its own project, into something very different. The book is incredibly quiescent. That's what makes it so shuddering. When you have this creeping realization that, and it only happens towards the end, there is this creeping realization of what is happening, of what is actually going on. Even the set pieces, like the scary set pieces, are almost nothing. They're very subtle, and they can all be explained away by natural occurrences or by the psychologies of the characters in question. Mostly what happens in the book, in terms of scares, in terms of like horror set pieces, it's nothing but bangings on the walls and doors of Hill House. That's it. That's largely it. You don't see anything. There are no ghosts. There are no spectres. And yet it is profoundly chilling, especially when you come to the end. And Shirley Jackson pulls this blinder where everything coalesces, everything comes together, and yet there's no exposition. It doesn't, the book itself does not tell you, so this was happening all along. You need to put it together. And when you do, the implications are horrifying. It takes the ghost story and it acknowledges the inherent sort of science fiction elements of it, i.e. the notion, very much like the Stone Tape, another sort of ghost story that we've discussed on this channel. It takes the notion of the ghost as a concept and acknowledges that there is kind of like a time distorting element, and most ghost stories do this even when they don't realize they're doing it. The Shining does this, for example. The Blair Witch Project does this, where the phenomenon of the ghost distorts time and space around it. So you get echoes occurring, echoes that not only come from the past but also back from the future as well, which creates this horrible, really cruel and cold and horrific sense of predestination. That the characters who come to these settings, the Overlook Hotel, Hill House, are predestined to come there and to die there and to be somehow absorbed into them. There is this sense that these places are machines. They are giant metaphysical engines that are sort of semi-sentient, but only in the most fungal way. They're not conscious. They're not calculating. They operate in the manner that like a predatory plant does, or like a fungus. They draw ambient psyches to themselves and absorb them. And that's what you get here. Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, alongside the Gothic texts that it is sort of the postmodern incarnation of, like, for example, Poe's work, The Fall of the House of Usher and whatnot. It acknowledges that these settings are, by their very nature, if there is a haunting, then there is a distortion in time. There is an interruption of natural process. And the way Shirley Jackson plays with that is masterful. It is one of the best examples of these kinds of fiction because it's so subtle. It's so subtle. You may be forgiven for thinking you're not even reading like a classic horror story as you're going through it, because everything is so domestic and polite and quiescent. And it's not until a significant way through the book that you start to realize what is happening, that you start to understand that reality is breaking down here, and that it's breaking down within the consciousness, within the psyche of a particular character, which is of course Nell, who is our protagonist for the most part. But that process is being echoed in Hill House itself. As the other characters acknowledge towards the end, Hill House is no good for her. Hill House is destroying her, it's slowly corroding her, and yet, at the same time, it's giving her what she feels she needs. It's giving her place, it's giving her purpose, it's giving her consistency. She herself, towards the end, starts saying that she's not meant to leave, that Hill House won't let her leave, and that is absolutely bloody true. That is absolutely true. It wants her. It wants her in particular, in the same way that the Overlook Hotel wants Jack, because they are ambient and they are open in ways that other people aren't. For both of those characters, it's their existential despair. Nell is one of the most identifiably tragic protagonists in horror, I would say. She's got nothing. Nell is this shattered psyche she's full of regret and lost chances, and it's very difficult not to identify with her because we're all Nell. Every single one of us is Nell. We all have that in our background somewhere. But Nell, she seems to find some glimmer of salvation in Hill House. In Hill House, she can reinvent herself. She can be someone that she wants to be. And yet, Hill House doesn't want that. It wants who she is. It wants the wounded, broken, despairing Nell, because that's what it feeds on. That's what it can draw into itself. And, of course, you realise at the end that that's what was there all the time. It's that despair, and it's amazing. It is one of the most beautiful haunted house stories ever written. The writing, I mean, the writing in this book is it's like the finest cut crystal. It is some of the most exquisite prose you will ever come across, not just in this genre, but in any genre. It is sublime. It is sublime, and everything in this book is sublime. The character relationships, the interactions, the misunderstandings, the dynamics, which are interesting and ambiguous. And because it's from Nell's perspective, you never really know what's actually happening, because so much about her psyche is paranoid and distorting and anxious and despair riddled. You don't really know if what seems to be like one of her most intense relationships is with Theodora, who is again a wonderful character, absolutely wonderful character. There is a suggestion that there's more between them than what Jackson actually comes out and says. There is definitely from Theo this wonderful kind of bisexual energy, which is really, really wonderful. And you get the that one of the tragedies of this book is you get the feeling that if Theo had actually done what Nell asks of her at one point, Nell kind of asks of her, "Can I come and stay with you at some point?" You get the impression that things might have been okay. Things might have worked out. But of course, it was never going to happen. Theo is her own person. She's her own woman. She's got her own life. She's got everything. She has everything that Nell doesn't. And that makes her... It makes her an icon of admiration for Nell, but also a source of profound envy and contempt. And she vacillates between these two. It's the saddest, most tragic thing imaginable. It really is. And it's beautiful in its own peculiar way. But the ending is so abrupt. When it those of you who've read it know when it happens, it's so abrupt and it's horrific and it's powerful and it shudders every time. Every time it shudders me to my core, and it leaves you feeling cold and empty and desolate, and it is absolutely stunning. If you haven't read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, my loves, get on your Kindle, go to your local bookstore or whatever and buy it. Go to your library, get it out. It's one of the texts, not only for horror, but for haunted house fiction, for psychological fiction, for feminist fiction. It is absolutely beautiful. And it just, every time it slays me. It just destroys me. I was in tears when I finished it last night. I was absolutely destroyed last night because it's so identifiable. You know, Nell is the lost child in all of us. Nell is the wasted chances in all of us. Nell is the love affairs that never happened or failed. She is the ambitions that we never pursued. She is all of that and more. And she's so identifiable, and her tragedy is our tragedy. That's what makes it so emotive and cathartic. Jackson is one of my favourite horror writers by a country mile. She is amazing. Everything she's written is incredible, but Hill House is her masterpiece without a shadow of a doubt. It is one of the most stunning horror novels in existence, and I urge you, my loves, to go forth and read it.